These are the places where the stuff of our nightmares comes to life. Allegedly.
He says everybody next door is dead.
Edinburgh Castle, Edinburgh, Scotland.
Dominating the skyline atop a tower of black volcanic rock, Edinburgh Castle stands, an overwhelming reminder of Scotland's rich and ancient history.
Medieval castles in Europe are always a popular tourist attraction, thanks to their long and interesting history. Edinburgh Castle, however, is one of the most haunted spots in Scotland, reportedly, of course. Visitors have claimed to have seen the spirits of colonial prisoners from the American Revolutionary War and French prisoners from the 7 Years' War. The most famous spirit, though, is the ghost of a piper who was sent to explore the underground tunnels and never returned. Legend says the faint sound of music can be heard from within the castle. Paris, France.
It's an enormous maze. We think there are as many as 7 levels to it, spreading under the entire city.
If you want to find a ghost, looking in the place where Parisians placed the bones of their dead for decades would be a great place to start. The catacombs of Paris hold the remains of nearly 6 million people, and so the site is essentially a mass grave.
You can't see the bottom. I don't even know how deep this is.
If that's not creepy enough, the ossuaries are a small part of Paris's vast network of underground tunnels and caverns. In 1871, French revolutionaries massacred a group of monarchists in one of the underground chambers. With that much death and that much history, how can it not be haunted?
It looks like the killing fields.
The RMS Queen Mary, Long Beach, California, USA.
Said to still be home to many disturbed and restless souls.
The RMS Queen Mary, once a prominent ocean liner in the North Atlantic Ocean, has been the subject of haunting rumors ever since it was permanently docked in California. The most haunted area of the ship is the engine room, where a 17-year-old sailor died trying to escape a fire. Cabin B340 is also said to be haunted, this time by the spirit of a murder victim, while the ghost of a young girl allegedly haunts the pool area after a drowning incident.
You know, I feel here now as if she was standing here, she'd just be dripping of water.
Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, San Francisco Bay, California, USA.
Long before Alcatraz was a fort or a prison, local Native Americans called it Evil Island, and many who did time on the rock agreed.
Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary has been cited as one of the most haunted places in the United States. There are numerous reports of ghostly encounters in the utility corridor, where 3 inmates were killed in a failed escape attempt.
What you'll see is a formation in the middle of the stairway, a gaseous formation, and also a shadow that is cast on the bottom of the photograph.
Cell 14D is another supposedly haunted area of the prison, due to a legend that says an inmate once spent a night calling out that he was being murdered by a creature with glowing eyes. Lo and behold, he was found throttled to death the next day. Al Capone's ghost also allegedly haunts the prison, so enter at your own risk. Borley Rectory, Essex, England.
We see shadows. I see a woman dressed in white, and I feel she was around us during the course of the night when we've been filming.
The village of Borley is not the sort of place you would associate with ghosts, but it is home to the infamous Borley Rectory, considered to be the most haunted house in all of England.
The famous story at Chillingham is that every brick of the castle is haunted.
Once the site of an ancient monastery, legend has it that a monk and a nun were killed in the area after their affair was discovered. The nun allegedly haunts the grounds of the rectory, while multiple tenants have reported paranormal activity like the ringing of bells, the breaking of windows, and the appearance of writing on the walls.
Bangar Fort, India. Built during the 17th century, Bangar Fort is located in the Aravalli Hill region of Rajasthan, India, which is around 146 miles from Delhi, and was originally intended as a place of sanctuary for Madho Singh I. Soon the building became known for strange occurrences, though, and it's by far the most haunted place in India. Stories tell of a wizard who once lived there and practiced dark magic, which he used to brew a love potion that he gave to her. She rejected it, though, and threw it into a rock, which became dislodged and fell. Eastern State Penitentiary, Pennsylvania, U.S. Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania was first opened in 1829 to house some of America's most dangerous and violent criminals, and was designed with new ideas in mind of how incarcerated people should be treated. Most inmates were kept in solitary confinement, and some of those who spent time there included Al Capone and Willie Sutton before the facility was closed in 1971. When it was built, it became the most expensive public building to have ever been constructed in the U.S. But during its 142-year history, it saw more than its fair share of murders, suicides, torture, disease, and people losing their minds due to the containment. Prisoners were treated in unimaginably terrible ways, with punishments such as water bath where they were dunked into, then hung on a wall on winter days until ice started forming on their skin, or an iron gag where they had their hands tied behind them and an iron bar inserted into their mouths, whereby if they moved, it would tear chunks out of the tongue. It's no surprise then that some spirits of former prisoners still haunt the former prison, and there are dozens of reports of paranormal activity within the walls every year, making it one of America's most haunted places. Number 11. Jazrat Al Hamra, United Arab Emirates. By 1830, the town of Jazrat Al Hamra, which is on the coast in the United Arab Emirates, had a population of around 200 people, most of whom were involved in diving for pearls. Over the next century, it would become home to 2,500 people, but due to disagreements with the rulers of the region, a large contingent were forced to move and relocate in Abu Dhabi. For those that remained, life started to become very weird, with reports of hauntings and paranormal experiences, particularly around the mosque that had been built by those who had to leave. According to legend, things got so bad that everyone fled, and it now stands abandoned as a true ghost town. The only people who dare venture into its boundary are ghost hunters and brave tourists, with very few of them returning without tales of strange noises, creepy cold chills, and the sensation that someone or something was following very closely behind them their entire time there. Number 10. The Hellfire Club. The Hellfire Club was a hunting lodge that was built on Montpelier Hill in Dublin, Ireland in 1725. Also thought to be the first Masonic lodge in the country, strange occurrences first started happening almost as soon as it had opened. The reason for this, according to local folklore, is that at the summit of the hill, there was an ancient cairn above a prehistoric burial ground, and not only were some of the stones disturbed, but they were actually used in the construction of the lodge itself. The group that used to meet there took part in occult rituals and supposed demonic summonings, and the energy they released is said to remain in the area to this day. Visitors often report seeing apparitions being suddenly overcome with horrendous thoughts, and those who stay there overnight have detailed eerily similar disturbing dreams. Well, there are stories of a ghoulish black cat that roams the area and brings terrible misfortune upon any who encounter it. The building was destroyed by a fire, which led to the lodge being relocated further down the hill to another venue, and it too is believed to be haunted. Today, both sites are popular destinations for people looking for a paranormal experience, and most get exactly what they were looking for. Number 9. The Castle of Good Hope, South Africa. The Castle of Good Hope in Cape Town, South Africa, was built in the 17th century on the coastline by the Dutch East India Company to protect their trade routes back to Europe. Because of land reclamation works, it now sits inland and is now regarded as being the oldest remaining building in the whole of the country. With such history behind it, the fort has seen countless tragedies and atrocities, and for a brief period between 1899 and 1902, was used as a prison to hold enemies that were captured during the Second Boer War. Having been built by slaves and as a place that experienced so much violence, there are countless souls still present in the region, and visitors often report experiencing very similar paranormal events. One well-known ghost is that of Governor Pieter Gijsbert van Noort, who unjustly executed 7 soldiers for desertion and was cursed by one of them before their deaths. He was found dead in his office soon after, and to this day can be heard muttering curse words that echo through the halls. There are also regular sightings of a ghostly black dog that lunges at visitors, a ghostly man that appears to jump from the walls, the sound of men and women arguing, and even bells that start chiming, even though they've long been taken out of service. So prevalent are the stories of hauntings in the fort that the guards responsible for patrolling the grounds today won't walk through the arches at night, and instead prefer to walk around the entire perimeter. Number 8. Old Changi Hospital, Singapore. Singapore's Old Changi Hospital was built in 1935 as a British Air Force hospital, but they were forced to withdraw at the outbreak of the Second World War when Japanese troops took over the island. They converted the building into a prison camp for Brits, their allies, and anyone considered to be anti-Japanese, and the condition these prisoners were kept in were atrocious. It also became the headquarters of the Kempeitai, the Japanese secret police, who would often conduct torturous interrogations on site. And once they'd finished with their victims and killed them, impaled their severed heads on metal spikes outside the buildings as a warning to others. Following the war, the British troops regained control of the hospital, and it was taken over by Singapore authorities in 1965, after the country gained its independence. Still, after the atrocities that had taken place there, rumors swirled of a paranormal presence, and there were frequent reports of screams echoing out and the appearance of headless ghosts. The hospital closed in 1997 and was sold to a property developer who planned to turn it into a luxury hotel, but the plan was suddenly scrapped without an official reason, which has led many to believe it was the ghostly presence that scuppered the idea. Today, it's fallen into a state of disrepair, and only the bravest people dare set foot anywhere near. Hinton Ampner, UK. Hinton Ampner is a stately home in Hampshire in England that was first built by a wealthy family in 1970 to replace a nearby Tudor house that was plagued with stories of hauntings. One of the women who lived there at the time, Mary Ricketts, wrote of rattling noises, the ground moving beneath her feet, strange temperature changes, and words of a different language being spoken to her while she slept. Despite a new house being built, it seems as if the strangeness associated with the place has continued, and all residents have befallen some form of tragedy. There were those who died prematurely, one who was murdered, and in 1960 a fire badly damaged the structure and meant it had to be fully rebuilt. The last owner died in 1985, and without any heirs he donated the property to the National Trust, who run regular tours around the place for those wanting to experience a piece of the English countryside. And of course, for visitors wanting their own chance to see the ghostly happenings. Number 6. Banff Springs Hotel, Canada. The Banff Springs Hotel in Fairmont, Canada is one of the most famous haunted places in North America, and there are a number of legends about this place that attract ghost hunters from around the world. In 1926, after a small fire that broke out in the hotel, it was discovered that the contractor who had built the hotel had mistakenly included a small room with no windows or doors, and not even the hotel owner knew about it. Soon after its discovery, ghosts were seen walking in and out of it, which makes you wonder why it was there in the first place, and if it had ever been used for something.
Room 873 is gone.
If 873 is your lucky number, then unfortunately you won't be able to stay in this room at the hotel, because legend has it that a family was brutally murdered in there. And because subsequent guests experienced such vivid paranormal activity, the owners bricked up the door to look like the rest of the hallway. Other stories include the ghost of a former bellman who often walks through the hotel, strange noises that come from the bridal suite, even when it's empty, and a bartender who occasionally appears when there are large groups waiting for drinks. Number 5. The Stanley Hotel, Colorado. If you've watched or read The Shining and were freaked out by the story, then you have the Stanley Hotel in Colorado to blame. Built in a location with stunning views across the Rocky Mountains, strange occurrences have been reported ever since an accident that happened in 1911. Despite opening as one of the first hotels in the world to be powered by purely electricity, the power supply had proved to be unreliable, so the decision was made to install gas lighting. The day after the work had been completed, a gas leak in room 217 was ignited when a maid entered it with a lit candle, which resulted in her being seriously injured and a large portion of the structure being damaged. The owner paid for the maid's medical care and promoted her to head maid when the hotel reopened. Following her death in the 1950s, her spirit was said to haunt the rooms near to where the accident happened. Now known as the Stephen King Suite, it's one of the most popular ghost hunter destinations in the world. And if you're lucky, you might just meet the ghost that inspired one of the most famous scary movies ever made. Number 4. Chateau du Trésesson. The stunning Chateau du Trésesson in the Brittany region of France is thought to have been built at some point in the 14th century. It remained in the possession of the same family for the following 400 years before being transferred to new ownership. And it was after this happened, around the time of the French Revolution, that a strange story was shared by a local thief that detailed what he saw in the surrounding grounds. One night, a carriage pulled up and 2 men jumped out to dig a large hole. Next, they removed a woman in a wedding dress from the carriage and buried her alive in the pit with her bouquet, shouting that she had dishonored her family. The thief ran home and told his wife, who made him return to rescue the woman, but by that time, she was dead. If there was ever an event that would cause a soul to remain and haunt a place, then it's this. And sure enough, visitors to the chateau often report seeing a mysterious woman dressed in white, walking through the courtyard close to where she's believed to have been buried. Number 3. Poveglia Island. Poveglia Island, which is in the Venetian Lagoon in Italy, is widely regarded as one of the most haunted places in Europe, thanks to its long and checkered history as a quarantine station, and in later years as a mental hospital. Fears of contracting the plague in the 18th century meant that incoming ships to the region had to moor at the island to make sure no one on board was sick. But this often led to completely healthy sailors coming into contact with the infected islanders and ultimately being trapped there themselves. It's thought that between 100 and 160,000 people died and were buried there. During this time, it was used for quarantine, many of whom had no signs of illness on arriving in Italy. The next use of the island as a mental hospital was equally as controversial, as it became known as a place where experiments were conducted to try and understand certain conditions and supposedly try to cure them. In reality, in any other setting, the treatments would have been considered to be torture and inhumane. Many patients died as a result of what was done to them. The island was abandoned in the 1960s and has since deteriorated, which means that not only does it feel creepy to walk around, but the ghost sightings, strange sounds, and overall sense of unease about the place means that only the hardiest of ghost hunters should ever set foot there. Number 2. La Recoleta Cemetery. Cemeteries are spooky places at the best of times, but while many might feel haunted, there's one in Buenos Aires, Argentina that definitely is. Known as La Recoleta, it's a place in the Recoleta neighborhood of the city, and several famous people have been buried there, including a number of former Argentinian presidents, Nobel Prize winners, and writers. It was the first official burial site in the city and almost feels like a town in its own right, with passageways and city blocks full of huge mausoleums. With more than 6,000 people's remains interned at the cemetery, there are quite a few stories of hauntings happening, which has led it to being known as Argentina's most haunted place. In 1902, for example, a family was distraught to find the lifeless body of their 19-year-old daughter, Rufina, with no signs of how she had died. Doctors confirmed that she was indeed dead, and it was arranged for her to be buried at La Recoleta. The night her coffin arrived, a powerful storm rolled over the city, so the ceremony was delayed. But the next morning, officials found her coffin had been moved and immediately summoned the family. Fearing some jewelry had been robbed, they opened it and found her body battered and bruised and scratched marks on the lid, proving that she wasn't in fact dead and had been buried alive. By the time they found that she had truly died, however, she was placed in a mausoleum that's designed to look as if she's walking out through the door. To this day, visitors walking nearby her resting place recall seeing her ghost desperately trying to escape. She's by no means the only ghost thought to be there. There's also the soul of a former caretaker, a mysterious woman in white, and a naval officer. And if you go at nighttime, you're said to be almost certain of encountering one of them. Number 1. The White House, Washington, D.C. The White House is probably the most recognizable building in the world, having first opened in 1792. But despite being the center of American democracy, it doesn't escape stories of hauntings and the appearances of ghosts. The most famous of these is the specter of Abraham Lincoln, who is often remembered as one of the greatest presidents, but had his life cut short in 1865 by assassination. He was midway through his second term and hadn't come close to finishing what he had set out to do. So it makes sense his soul decided to stay around and see it finished. Several subsequent presidents, their families, and White House staffers have gone on record to say that they had an encounter with this ghost, including Lyndon Johnson, Theodore Roosevelt, and even Winston Churchill during a visit. The last sighting supposedly happened in the 1980s. But this isn't the only specter that's believed to haunt the building. There have also been reports of the apparition of his son, who died of typhoid in the White House when he was 11, and several other people who are thought to have been slaves or servants of the building. And with sightings being so frequent and reported by reliable sources, it must make it one of the most